Hey guys, this is Rusty with Rusty Brown Photography. Welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about portraits, specifically the formal definition of a portrait, the informal definition of a portrait, what makes a good portrait lens, what are my favorite portrait lenses, and I'm going to give you a demonstration of what happens if you take a photograph of a subject who stays in the same spot under the same conditions from three different focal lengths. How does the portraiture look different when you do that? We're going to talk about that. Let's go. Hey everybody, I'm Rusty with Rusty Brown Photography. Welcome back to the channel. Hopefully you all had a really good Thanksgiving and you were able to stay safe, and hopefully you didn't eat too much. But today I'm here to talk about portraits specifically, right? We're going to talk about the definition. I'm going to give you a sample of what happens if you take a photograph using three different focal lengths of the same subject under the same conditions. Does it look any different? And if so, does it matter to you? And we're going to talk about what I think makes a good portrait lens. So to start off, let's take a look at a couple of definitions, right? The formal definition, and there are a couple. If you look it up like I did, right, you'll get something like it's a painting, drawing, photograph, or engraving of a person, especially one depicting only the face. Also, you have another definition, which is a portrait is a painting, photograph, sculpture, or other artistic representation. The intent is to display the likeness, personality, and possibly even the mood. Artistic is the key word that I want you to take from there, right? So my personal definition, that's what's online. I'll tell you what my definition of a portrait is. A portrait has to, in my opinion, has to involve a person as the subject or subjects in the photograph, right? Now, not every picture that has a person in it is a portrait. If you're on vacation, you're in Washington, D.C., and you take your family out and you stand in front of the U.S. Capitol, for example, and you take a nice shot with the Capitol in the background, that's a good family photograph. If your son is a motorcycle racer and you catch him, as he comes around, he's doing a big race and he hits the hill and he's flying and he's going over some cars and you stop that, that's a great action photograph, not a portrait. You take the same son with his motorcycle and in a static shot where he's standing next to it, helmet in hand, and the motorcycle is there and it's just him with the motorcycle, to me that is a portrait. It's an environmental portrait because it says something about that person and the environment that they're in. That's my unofficial definition of a portrait. So let's look at a couple of examples first, right? And I'll start off with the classic version, which is a portrait in terms of orientation, meaning vertical, right, and not horizontal, and just a headshot. Take a look at this portrait of Charles. It meets the definition, the formal definition of a portrait, right? Its orientation is in the portrait mode, as well as it is a headshot, single individual, nondescript background. We could say the same here of this particular portrait of JR, even though it's a little more robust background, right? If you look carefully, you can see the lake, the water on the lake. You can see the trees and the woods that are on the other side of the lake behind him. But from a portraiture perspective, single individual, right? Nobody else in the shot, nothing going on in the background that's unique to that individual. So in addition to having your standard portrait, that is a portrait both in orientation and content, you could have a portrait that is horizontal, right, in terms of its orientation and more than just a headshot. With this particular picture of Hunter, I consider it a portrait because it only features her nondescript background. You'll notice that it is not in a vertical orientation, it is in a horizontal orientation, right, or a landscape, but still a portrait. Same thing here if you take a look at Zion. This is also a non-traditional layout in the sense that it's not vertical either. It is horizontal, but yet I still consider it a portrait. Quick thing as we go through these images, let me go back to Hunter for a second. One of the things that I try to do in a portrait that is more than just a headshot is I try to incorporate angles, specifically triangles. I think that's where the artistic piece of it comes in for me personally. You look at the right or leading shoulder, down to the elbow and across. We have a triangle there. We also have one from the palm of her hand down to the base of her neck, over to her elbow and back, if you notice. Triangles. Now here, I talked to Zion, my main man Zeebo, about a triangle, and he was like, what? So shout out to Zeebo for giving his best shot. By the way, he just had a birthday this month, and he's now 3 years old, but this has always been one of my favorite portraits of young Zeebo. You can also have a portrait that is vertical in nature and be more than just a headshot. When you look at this shot of Emma, I consider this to be a portrait, even though it's more than a headshot. 3/4 body length, nondescript background, and in this particular case, she's facing the camera. Here, if you look at Gia, same thing, 3/4 body for the most part, and if you look, like we talked about before, up around her arm, you'll see a triangle there. In addition to the 3/4 length shot, I believe you can have a portrait that's also full body. If we take a look at this one of Jay first, let's get the triangle out the way. There are a couple of them actually. She's got both of her arms up, so you may not see the away triangle with her left arm because it's almost out of the shot. But you see what we've got going with the lead arm triangle there. She also gave me a triangle here with her lead leg. But from a portrait perspective, I call this environmental because we've got a race car. We're clearly in a garage, and it's the juxtaposition of being in a garage with a model, but a full-length portrait from head to toe. If we take a look at this shot of Jamie, another full-length portrait, right? Full body length. She is not looking at the camera, but I still consider it a portrait. We used the stool to help create the triangle here. When we're talking about triangles, I'm gonna throw in a bonus shot here also of Jamie because of all the models that I've worked with. When we talk about the triangles, nobody has nailed it like Jamie has with regards to this particular shot coming up. I think we captured 7 triangles here in this particular shot. Now, it is a portrait, full body length, horizontal in nature, but if you start over on the left, she's giving me one with her right foot that's out front, her right leg, her left leg, her left arm, her right arm, and there's one also slight, ever so slight if you look where the base of her wrist is, coming down to the first rung on the stool. She just could get into triangle mode like no one else. So you've seen so far, right? You can have a headshot, you can have a mid shot, you can have a 3/4 body shot, you can have a full length shot as well. But in terms of orientation, a portrait doesn't have to meet vertical or horizontal. You can actually have, if you like, you can do a square one like for Instagram. If we take a look at Sarah, for example, not horizontal, not vertical, but still a portrait. Can you have more than one person in a portrait? And yes, you can. Again, with Jamie, and now we also have Doug. Full body portraits. Neither subject is looking at the camera. Both are generating triangles. With Jamie, you can see between her right leg and her left leg, she created one. Doug's got one on the ground from his butt up to where the rear of his knee is, down to where his heel and back. He gives a triangle there. If we take a look at Dee and Margo, same thing. Full body portrait with 2 people, also with triangles. By having them pose with the weights in this direction, we get a nice triangle shape here. We get one on Margo's lead arm. Both ladies are giving us one from the ground here and from the ground there. Let's talk a little bit about the lenses, right? And again, I did an episode called What's in My Bag. I'll put a card up, let's say here somewhere. It'll be somewhere on the screen that talks about all of my lenses. But when it comes to portraiture, I'm going to say right off the bat, my favorite lens is the 135 f1.8. More times than not, I don't have enough space to work with a 135, but I do prefer primes over zooms for portraits. In that case, here's the 85mm 1.4 Zeiss, another lens that just renders some really, really awesome portraits. I would say that of all the portraiture I've done, most are done with the 85. My favorite is the 135, but the reason most are done with the 85 is because obviously with a prime, you have to be within a particular physical distance to your subject. And if you're doing anything more than a headshot, It's a little hard to do with the 135 if you're working in a limited space. The 85 allows me to do that a whole lot better. When I'm traveling and I'm not doing professional shoots for portraits, I go zoom, and I go with this zoom specifically. The 70-200 f2.8 G Master from Sony. Again, if you look at what's in my bag, I go into greater detail. The beauty of this is it's a single lens, and I can capture any focal length. I can get everything I would get with an 85. I can get everything I can get with a 135. Everything in between, and everything between the 135 and 200. It's a beast of a lens, and it renders really good portraits. Again, my preference is a prime, but when I can't travel with the primes, I like to take a zoom. Now, one of the things that I talked about was I was going to show you what can happen if you take a photograph of the same subject using different lenses for different focal lengths, and what the results will be, right? Here we have a portrait. This is Marquiest, the chairman and CEO and president of GMG SE. That's GMG Sports and Entertainment. He is a professional sports agent. I'll put a link to Marquiest's site in the description. This particular portrait, right? I had him stand in the exact same spot. This is done with the 135, straight out of camera, no edit, no anything. I changed the lens and went to the 70-200 and shot it all the way out to 200, but I kept it at the same settings as you saw in the previous one. Now the last one, which really surprised me, came from the Sony a6400. It is an APS-C camera, very small camera. I put this lens on it that I'm filming today's show with, which is the Sigma 56mm. With a 56mm, obviously, I had to get closer to Marquiest. I kept him in the same spot, but in terms of what I was looking for in his particular portrait, the smaller APS-C, it nailed it. It did exactly what I needed it to do over the 200 and over the 135 prime. So what you can tell from that is that it doesn't really matter which particular lens you use. It's how you shape up your portrait in your head. Now, an APS-C camera, real quick, with a 56 millimeter prime is the equivalent of an 85 on a full-length camera, right? So I believe you can get any kind of portrait you want with any kind of lens that you have. And other times, don't be afraid of your zooms. You're going to be in situations where you don't have enough physical space to get a good shot with a prime. So take a look at this shot of Hunter, right? You'll see that it was shot at a focal length of 60mm, meaning I used my 24-70 because there wasn't a lot of room in this room. I still wanted to get a 3/4 body portrait. Having a zoom that could open up so that I could nail this particular length was critical. There was no way I'd be able to get that shot with the 85 because I couldn't get far enough back. So in that particular case, the zoom worked. So as you can see, it doesn't matter which lens you use to get the portrait you want, right? Some of my best work has come from a zoom, even though I like to do my portraits with a prime. Seize the opportunity that you have. If you're limited in space, use the best lens you have. If you're not limited in space, use your favorite lens. It doesn't matter. I really want to hear what you guys have to say regarding your definition of portraits and what is your favorite lens. What lens do you use the most, right? And as this is the weekend after Thanksgiving, let me say that I am super thankful for each and every one of you. I'm so glad that you guys are here and rocking with the channel. If you haven't done so already, please give me a like and subscribe. It helps me a ton in terms of bringing you good content like this. I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Let me know your thoughts on portraiture. I'll be back in another 2 weeks with another topic. Until then, stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye.